While folks and Canadians across the country continue to be generous, we are starting to hear that it's not enough to meet the growing levels of demand that food banks are facing. And so when you think of levels of donations, food banks, and sort of the strain on people's budgets, food banks get hurt in a few ways. So, one, we see more people come to our doors than ever before. So as people are struggling, more of those will need the services of a food bank. And then secondly, people's budgets, when they're strained, have less money to give. They're not as likely to donate to their local food bank or buy the food and put it in their local grocery store bins to support the food bank because their budgets are stretched. And then third, when we think about food banks and having to our own budgets and needing to then stretch those dollars even further as more people come in. So we're really feeling the strain of both the declining levels of donations and the growing level of need. The word that I hear often with food banks across Canada is the word unsustainable. So food banks are the toughest people I know. They roll up their sleeves, they solve every crisis that comes through their door. They get the food, they make sure people have what they have. But when you see the number of the rates of growth that we've seen and the strain, the amount of donations that we need to also see coming through the door, either stagnate or not keep up the pace, this is not a sustainable situation. So what we always say is that we need governments to step in and take action to address the root causes of poverty and low incomes, which drive food insecurity, which drive food bank use. And until they do, we'll keep doing our best to meet the need. At the end of the day, what we want to see is people having access to the income they need to grocery shop for themselves and for their families. So that's where most of the investment should be, is in making sure people have income. That's going to be what helps solve food insecurity. That's going to be what helps solve poverty and low incomes in Canada. And that's where governments should be focusing their attention. And by and large, food banks aren't government funded. We rely on the generosity of communities. I do also want to say that food banks aren't sort of passive in the face of the stresses that we're dealing with. Food banks are incredibly innovative organizations that are always looking for new ways to get new, fresh, culturally appropriate food into their communities to make sure people have food that they need. So it's not that we're being passive. We're always striving to find new models, new ways of doing things, new sources of food, and we need that generous support in order to be able to meet the challenges. This is the highest level of food bank use that we've seen in Canadian history. We can look back after the 2008 recession. We did see food bank use climb 30% in the years following. So this is faster. The growth is faster than it was in 2000 after the 2008 downturn. But we did see it go up 30%, and then it plateaued. So we were never quite down after that growth, and that's when the pandemic hit. We were starting to see some positive signs that children were coming down in terms of their representation in food bank use, but otherwise we've just sort of grown from there. But we know that from those models, from historic information, that food banks tend to deal with economic challenges for a much longer stretch than you see represented in sort of federal data or statistics. So, the economy gets better, which is great, but food banks are still dealing with that long tail of need as people get back on their feet and are able to support themselves. So we know that we are in it now for likely years of elevated food bank use. Food bank use nationally, in our last hunger count, it was up 80% since prior to the pandemic, which is, again, so 30% after 2008. What we're seeing as of 2023 was an 80% increase. That, will likely will be higher in 2024. So we haven't seen, as I said, this rate of growth since food banks have been collecting data.
We ended up short on our financial donations, but we ended up coming in just a little over on our food donations. So that's always a good thing. The food donations are obviously very, very helpful. But the financial donations are also really important because that's what we use to buy the perishable items like meat, milk, uh, margarine, eggs. And those are highly valued items for the clients. We just finished a client survey recently, and those are the items, and produce actually is the other item that is the things that people want more of all the time.